Welcome everyone, my designation is N.O.V.A.C and I'm here to distract you with an explanation of the MCU time-space multiverse workings. First of all, we need to understand that Marvel doesn't want to ruin their perfect, pristine, high-quality record of, Marvel doesn't want to fuck up even more. Now, more than ever, they need to have a tighter plan, because they're playing with time travel stories, otherwise they might end up with a similar dilemma as Lost did.
My main concern is keeping us alive.
Oh, and Lost? They were all dead, I think.
They had problems that weren't able to resolve in a satisfactory way, and that might damage Marvel's stories even more than what they already are. So, I'ma try to tighten up the rules of the MCU time-space realities. Marvel, if you're listening, pay attention and don't fuck it up. We have been introduced to the divergent theory of time travel in Endgame, where time travel causes the ramification of a branch reality as explained by the Ancient One and the Hulk, and this will be important in the future because branch timelines and parallel timelines are two very different things. In the multiverse, there's many unchecked timelines. These are parallel ones which by definition mean that they're on the same track but not touching the sacred timeline. The ones on What If, for example, are outside the sacred timeline, and we watch these shows as a peek into what other realities are out there. But the secret timeline is separated from these other timelines, unable to cross them, but that doesn't mean that they don't exist. If we follow the logic of real-life theory plus the fictional logic of the MCU, we could say that all timelines started at the Big Bang. All branched from that one moment where time and space were created. We know that time and space are related, so the Big Bang was where everything started, and from then every possibility creates a new universe. But Kang, to protect that specific timeline from the other Kangs, has to isolate it from the rest, and he does this by transforming that linear timeline that branches from the Big Bang towards others into a time loop.
Yeah, temporal manipulations can create branches in time. Unstable dimensional openings. Spatial paradoxes, time loops! You want to get stuck reliving the same moment over and over forever?
He traps the sacred timeline in a repeating cycle, one that spans eons, but is still a loop. We, as an outside viewer, can peek into timelines that aren't part of the loop, other stories beyond the sacred timeline. But before the one who remains is killed, the sacred timeline isn't interacting with the rest, even though there's others that exist. I hope that's completely clear. We see the TVA pruning the ramification of the timeline where Loki escapes, which means that Tony Stark that got a heart attack because of Ant-Man, that Ancient One that Hulk talks to, and everyone in that timeline is dead. But that doesn't mean that a similar timeline that is separated from the sacred timeline couldn't exist, a parallel timeline. So technically we could see what happens after Loki steals the Tesseract on that parallel unpruned timeline, where the TVA doesn't exist and doesn't interrupt him. But it's just not the same team of Avengers and the same reality that got pruned on Loki episode 1. That would be a parallel, unsupervised, non-looping branching timeline. Before the one who remains is killed, time travel is possible within the sacred timeline, but every change made creates a branch that gets pruned. In Loki episode 1, Ravonna says,
"We're not here to talk about the Avengers."
Oh no?
No. What they did was supposed to happen. You escaping was not.
she's wrong because she's working with the little information that she has. Remember, she was lied to and she's believed in the timekeepers. As we know, there's no such thing as free will, and everything is predetermined by action and reaction. So if the Avengers were meant to travel back in time, just because of that chain of actions, they were always meant to give Tony Stark the case. He was always meant to be hit by the Hulk opening the door, and Loki was always meant to escape with the Tesseract. But he also was always meant to have that Nexus event and always meant to end up in the TVA, and that branch was always meant to be pruned. At the end, everything is part of Kang's plan, everything is written by the one who remains, and it was important for the Avengers to fail on that time, because that creates this variant of Loki and the events that we follow on this show. That's Kang's backup plan in case he dies or retires as he wanted, and it's part of what he needs to happen to generate this time loop. You can see the theory of why Loki is important and part of the bigger plan on Screen Rant and the Heavy Spoiler Show. They have talked about it a lot. If you want to know more about this Loki's variant, go check them out. But coming back to the multiverse travel and time travel within the MCU, after Kang dies, the MCU is allowed to interact with parallel timelines as the branches reach and collide with them. The bubble that separated this timeline pops, and even though it is still on a loop, it is possible to collide with others. That's why Doctor Strange is able to interact with the Illuminati's timeline. He branches far from the sacred timeline until he reaches the completely separate reality that again existed since the start of time, but the MCU was isolated from it. A different timeline that instead of the Avengers had the Illuminati. That's how we know it's different enough to not be a branch of the main MCU, but a parallel one. This doesn't completely explain why and how time travel works in the MCU. After all, in Season 2 we see Loki having a conversation with O.B. that is within the sacred timeline, affecting what O.B. tells Mobius. So there are 4 types of time travel theory. The one of Back to the Future that will create paradoxes and that is already discarded by the explanation of the Hulk and by the description of the branching timeline. The branching reality version, which we have seen through the MCU, where Ravonna, for example, travels to a sacred timeline to give Timely the TVA book and creates a branching line from that. Predestination, where time travel has always had happened, and as we stated before, no one has free will, but everything that happened before was meant to happen. Like in Harry Potter, where Hermione and Harry travel back in time to do what they had always done and where nothing ever changed. This version of time travel also exists in the MCU for what we've seen in Loki Season 2, and my theory is that this type of time travel only happens within the TVA, outside of time and space, outside of the sacred timeline. And finally, the 4th type would be time travel to the mind of oneself in a previous moment in time. This would allow to change the future without entering in a bootstrap paradox. Think of it as Groundhog Day, where the time traveler can change things from the past without interacting with himself. There's not 2 of the same person at the same time, but instead the consciousness of the future self returns to the body of the past, and that's what time slipping is, like reloading a previous save file. And this is only possible via controlled time slipping, as we saw in episode 5 of Loki, where he returned to his previous position pre-spaghettification, but not as a double of himself, but inside his own existence. But now that Kang is dead and he is being technically reborn, in the loop of existence between him fighting his variants and creating the TVA, there will be a chance for the MCU to interact with other timelines, as the bubble that protected and isolated the 1999-99 timeline is popped and has no protection from crashing with the others. This will probably lead to secret wars, and perhaps, if Kang's plan continues as expected, be predestined to be isolated once again. So to summarize, traveling back in time with machines creates branches. Traveling within the TVA, uncontrolled time slipping, is always predestination, but within this predestination, controlling the time slipping results in course correcting the timeline. Traveling to one's previous self, like loading a save file on a video game to keep moving forward, where what moves in time isn't the body, but the consciousness. And I am saying that course correction of timeline is also predestination, because everything was part of Kang's plan, right? So Loki, going to the spaghetti end of the universe and seeing everything disappear was meant to happen for him to go back, fix the timeline, and then continue in the track of Kang's plan. He was always meant to do that. None of these contradict each other and create a cohesive theory of time travel within the MCU. Now, I hope that's understandable and Marvel better follow their own rules, because there's nothing more unsatisfactory than contradictions in storytelling. Now, Marvel, if this wasn't your plan, just take the advice and go forward with it. And if that's clear to Marvel and to you, the only thing left to say is thank you so much for watching, and I hope you come back and let me distract you on my next video. N.O.V.A.C signing off.